The pandemic, of course, has impacted most professional amateur sports in this country. Just today, with the Major League Baseball season only a week old, more games were postponed. This time, an upcoming series in Philadelphia was called off because a Philadelphia coach and a clubhouse attendant tested positive. A source confirms to CNN 19 members of the Miami Marlins, as we mentioned earlier, including 2 coaches, have now tested positive. They'll not play a game until the weekend at the earliest. Meantime, the National Basketball Association began its restart tonight in Orlando. As if to confirm irony is dead, the first bucket was scored by Utah's Rudy Gobert, the player whose positive test triggered the NBA shutdown. Joining us now, Hall of Fame broadcaster who's most identified with baseball, CNN contributor, Bob Costas. Thanks so much for being with us, Bob. Let's talk about Major League Baseball. It's updated its virus protocols in the wake of these outbreaks. They're now encouraging players to not leave the hotel rooms while traveling, requiring surgical masks instead of cloth ones, mandating teams have a compliance officer they travel with to enforce the guidelines. Do you think it's enough to prevent more players from getting sick?
Common sense says no, even with the best possible protocols, the best possible intentions and medical expertise. It's like swatting at locusts. And you can't expect, if you're not in a bubble, you can't expect these young people. Think of the Rutgers football team, now quarantined because reports are that some of them went to an on-campus party. There's reports that a couple of Marlins went out in Atlanta before they wound up in Philadelphia. Then when there were only 2 or 3 positives and they knew about it, they decided to go and play anyway. Now there are 19 on their team. There are Phillies guys affected, not players, but staff, as you said. So the Yankees couldn't play in Philadelphia. Meanwhile, the Nationals don't want to go to South Florida. They balked at that. So the Marlins' home is right in the middle of one of the hot spots. The Blue Jays can't play at home in Canada because they flattened the curve there, and the government doesn't want American players coming in. So they've got to go to Buffalo, their AAA affiliate. The Marlins may be without a home, but incidentally, their AAA affiliate happens to be in Wichita, Kansas. I'm hoping they make it all the way through. I'm a huge baseball fan, as you may know. But common sense tells me there are so many needles to thread here and so many variables that if they can make it all the way across from one end to the other in this tightrope walk, it's going to upset all the odds.
I think I know your answer to this next question then, Bob. I mean, it's been 1 week since the season opener. This is where we are, just like you described. So what do you think? What is the chances that this season's going to actually be able to be finished out?
If I had a good handle on that, I'd be on the phone to somebody in Las Vegas. And even a medical expert like you knows that all we have is best educated guesses. I want to say this in defense of Major League Baseball. People said, well, go into a bubble. Hockey and basketball, smaller rosters, they only had to finish what they'd started and get into the playoffs. Baseball had to play some semblance of a regular season, even if it was only 60 games. And the Players Association firmly said, we do not want to go into a bubble. We don't want to be separated from our young families or whatever the case may be. We want to play in our home ballpark. So they're stuck with that. Same thing with football. They're going to play in 32 different locations. Think of the size of football rosters and think of the nature of the sport with contact on every play. And then think about college football. More and more that seems less and less likely. It may be unlikely that the NFL can get in a full season. But the idea of playing college football under these circumstances, players not compensated, no union to protect them, that's unconscionable.
The NBA, as mentioned, they restart their season tonight. Do you think what they've done in terms of the bubble is going to work?
It seems like it has a good chance to work. They've got to go for a lesser period of time. They have smaller rosters. They're enforcing the bubble. So far as we know, last report, not a single positive test, either with NBA players in Orlando or with NHL players in Toronto and in Edmonton. I wanted to get this thought in, Sanjay, and I'd like your thought about it. Eduardo Rodriguez, pitcher for the Red Sox, had COVID. He has since recovered, but now he has inflammation of the heart muscle. We know that that's one of the secondary effects after recovery. And then I think of football players. Obesity is a pre-existing condition. A generation ago, you hardly ever saw a football player over 300 pounds. Now there are hundreds of them with BMIs well in excess of what qualifies as obese. Aren't they in particular peril?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, I'll tell you, the NFL Players Association has raised this, Bob, as you know, and looking at the stats, they'll say 70%, and this surprised me, but 70% of NFL players would be considered vulnerable because of pre-existing conditions like that. So
there you go.
That's a real concern.
I want to talk just, Bob, on another sort of note on this. The NBA season restart opener tonight, we saw both teams, players and coaches, take a knee during the national anthem. NBA does have a rule against this, but NBA Commissioner Adam Silver just said in a statement he respects teams' peaceful protest and he'll not enforce the rule. As you look at this, what does it say about how the players view their role in the movement for racial justice?
Well, it's obvious that a great number of them wish to be active in some way, and I think Adam Silver's decision is correct. They have a long-standing rule. They're a progressive league, always have been in every respect, including racial matters. And they've had this rule, however, you stand for the national anthem or you stay in the locker room. But they've suspended it under this unique set of circumstances. When they're back to playing a full season, hopefully next year, then the circumstance may change. But for now, I think it's the right thing to do.
On Monday, the NCAA said it'll allow schools to reduce their fall sports schedule, I think, to half of a typical season, but it wouldn't apply to football. How does that affect the athletes of these other sports, not just from a health perspective, but a performance perspective, you think?
Well, every sport differs in terms of, you can play tennis, you can play golf. There are certain things you can do more or less safely. There's also this, Stanford, which is renowned for having a broad-based sports program, multiple sports, a couple dozen, if not more. They had to cut a number of them in anticipation of lost revenue from football and basketball. Whatever the flaws may be, whatever the hypocrisies may be surrounding big-time college sports, it's those two sports that pay for tennis and lacrosse and crew and all the rest. So that takes a hit as well.
You and I both love sports, Bob. We've talked about this. But it's not essential, right? I mean, I mean, people love it, but it's not. Money is obviously a factor, as you mentioned, since it's a business. But at what point do you think different leagues will have to consider stopping a season? I mean, what will be the trigger, do you think, for something like that?
When it just becomes impractical, when the health considerations are overwhelming, and even the desire to recoup some of that television money. And there's a lot of television money if baseball can make it through to a World Series. And with football, even the regular season, it's a huge bonanza. So that's their incentive for owners and players both. But it may just reach a tipping point. And where that is subjective. But they can't wait for a league-wide outbreak. Plus, if you start losing teams because too many players on a team can't play, so they can't become competitive, you can't continually dip into free agents and minor leaguers, then you have difficulty putting together a schedule or having competition that has the requisite integrity. But again, I don't know that there's any objective point at which you say we're throwing in the towel, but subjectively they could get there.
I think we have about a minute left. How do you think the not having fans changes the experience?
You know, I've been watching a lot of baseball games, and I see that the players are every bit as passionate and competitive and tuned in to what they have to do. But it's a strange thing to watch. Guy makes a spectacular play, somebody hits a grand slam home run, and all you hear is the echoes of the crack of the bat and maybe a little bit of chatter coming from the dugout. I think in basketball and in hockey, continuous motion sports, maybe the momentum that they feel, the adrenaline they feel from crowds that are generally closer because they're in smaller arenas rather than large stadiums, maybe that would have a larger effect than it would have in baseball. And we'll have to see about football if they're even able to play any football.
Yeah. Bob Costas, it's always great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anderson. Thank you, Sanjay.